Hi and welcome to Gallery Watch. We're here in the Helena Valley at Joanna's studio, who is one of the artists for the Mundaring Hills Open Studios. We're here with Joanna Lefroy-Capel. So Joanna, do you want to tell us a bit about the Mundaring Open Hills Studios?
Yes, it's a group of 10 artists, Sasha, who some of them have been exhibiting together for quite a long time, I think. And the last weekend in October is when they open their studios, and they invited me to be a part of the group. I'm a figurative artist, and but there are other figurative artists in the group. I guess our styles are all kind of individual and have evolved over many, many years, I suppose. I'm a self-taught artist, but it's always the figurative stuff, the narratives. Every one of my paintings has a story behind it. So it's just the kind of narratives that I find intriguing. Sometimes inspired by a photograph or a story or something that I've seen. My work is figurative and always tells a story.
What's the story behind this image here? Because the contrast between the colours is just beautiful.
This was actually from a very tiny little black and white photograph of my sister's christening. And I've created the faces just out of my head. I didn't want it to be a family portrait. I loved the composition. I loved the fact that they were all kind of trying to settle the children to get this official photograph, and it never ever quite happened because, you know, one is sort of almost picking her nose and the other one's kind of wanting something from her mother. This is often how a painting of mine will start, just with a gem of an idea, and then the story kind of writes itself. Creating a sort of a formality in a very contrasting, unlikely setting.
So going from your home, your childhood, you go very multicultural. Do you want to tell us about these three images?
I decided several years ago that I was going to have my leap year, and I was going to go to Spain and paint and draw and try to learn Spanish. And so I took off, and these paintings are as a result of that time that I had in Spain. I went to a school and they taught Spanish and also flamenco dance and guitar. And I was able to sit in on flamenco classes, which was fantastic. I did a lot of drawings from that.
Do you want to tell us a bit about the backstory of this image here?
This is this is the Alhambra Palace in Granada, just a room. And it's full of history and quite a bloody history. And the rooms just kind of echo, and it's quite an extraordinary place to visit. I married for the second time in 2008, and this was taken from a photograph of my son and my husband's two sons at the ceremony, looking very smart in their white shirts. And I've actually created Spanish faces. These are not portraits of them. I found that a wonderful old postcard in Granada, which really was probably from the 40s or 50s or something like that. And it's just all of these Spanish people in this kind of village setting in a street in Granada. And I loved those three women. Again, the faces just came out of my head. But I just loved the way they were sitting, and I felt there was a kind of story there too. Perhaps they're looking with envy at this one's particular dress, or they think she's a little bit up herself. Just again, a kind of narrative which the viewer can interpret however they like.
Yeah, looking back, I thought these two were linked, like these men were looking at these women.
Painting a picture is that the minute it hangs on a wall in a public place, even in your own home, people that come through and look at them create their own stories. And quite often it's nothing to do with the story that I had in mind, but I love the fact that it just takes on a life of its own.
Back to your childhood, this picture you said represents it. Do you want to tell us a bit about it?
It's called Endless Summer, and again it's inspired by a little black and white photograph of me and my sisters playing in the creek on the farm. But to me, we just had the most idyllic childhood. It's not portraits of me and my two sisters, but it's really talking about that absolutely idyllic time in my life where it just felt so safe and like it would just go on forever.
We go on to ones of, what's this image here called?
This is called Winning Isn't Everything, and I've got a bit of a fetish about bowling ladies. I love to put them in incongruous settings where they do things that they wouldn't normally do, because I love the idea of creating a kind of formal ritual in a, like I did with the christening painting, a formal kind of ritual in an unlikely setting. So here they're just literally in the middle of a paddock, and they've created this area where they play their bowls. Viewer to be able to tell the story without actually seeing what their eyes or their mouths look like, just through the body language.
So do you want to tell us a bit about this image here, because it's a little bit dark and mysterious?
This is called Oasis, and I've spent a lot of time in the Kimberley, and some of my work after my childhood inspiration, a lot of the work was influenced by the Kimberley and the colours and the extraordinary characters. So this is really just about a group of guys that have been mustering cattle or something like that, and they've just come in for that first cold beer, and they're grimy and sweaty and exhausted. But I just wanted to create the sense of coming into a cool space, drinking a cool ale, and just, kind of relaxing, and, a job well done and feeling good about themselves. So it's just a very simple story. I like the idea that there's somebody over here that the viewer can kind of create in their heads that he's talking to. Yeah. belong to a group of artists, and we have a different model every week. You can either do life drawing down one end of the hall, or you can do a portrait, and we get about 2.5 hours to create a portrait. So I'm just using cardboard and acrylic. This one again is inspired by, it's from my childhood, and it's inspired by a little black and white photograph. My mother was a member of the CWA, the Country Women's Association, and as a child I was intrigued by the kind of ritual that went on. They would sweep away all the sheep shit in a corner of the barn and then set up the card table with a cloth on it, and they would have the agenda. I think perhaps this one's retiring. She's the retiring president, the one on the left, and she's rather bored with the fact that you know, there's not quite enough fuss being made.
Stay tuned with Gallery Watch. We'll be back after the break with more from the Mundaring Hills Open Studios.